I'm live with AUDE as we go through the ENTJ profile. So this is the Keirsey ENTJ profile. So that's interesting. So we can go through this. And I've realized that people pretty much can see this on their mobile devices. So I'll let you read that, Rachel, and then you can stop and comment on any bits you like.
Okay. Yeah. Mind if I just read it out loud?
Yep, fine with me.
Okay. These abstract utilitarians, as I like to call them, Plato's rationals, Aristotle's dialecticals, Galen's phlegmatics, and Briggs' NTs, have a tightly configured personality so that each trait of character entails the other traits. This means that Mother Nature does not permit rationals, any more than other types, to pick and choose their traits of character. If their environment enables them to develop a given trait, it can only be one that is predetermined by their temperament. While it is useful to think of each of the four temperaments as a single unified configuration of attitudes and actions, individual members of each temperament clearly differ from one another. Thus, all the rationals seem to have a natural gift for strategic ingenuity, but some, the scheduling NTs, are drawn to the directive role of coordinator of efficient campaigns and contingency plans, while others, the probing NTs, prefer the informative role of engineer of efficient prototypes and models. These two divisions can be further broken down to reflect an expressive or a reserved social attitude, with the coordinators tending to play the role variants of Fieldmarshal or mastermind, and the engineers playing inventor or architect. Okay, so the NTJs are coordinators then.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Keirsey changed the engineer name to constructors in Personology, which was his ultimate book.
Okay.
Published 3 years before he died in 2013, aged 92. Oh, I'll say something about abstract utilitarians. So abstract in speech, reflected abstract thought, and utilitarians in that they will do things however they flipping well see is the right way without going by the book.
Right.
A quick note on how NFs are cooperative. They're not quite as cooperative as SJs, but they are cooperative with their own ethics. So whereas an NT and an SP might do things as it suits for the best situation, with an NF, their actions are still going to be within the parameters of who they are and that kind of thing. So it's not so much that NFs are cooperative as they are sort of utilitarian.
Well, I also see the cooperativeness in that even though it's kind of a personal, subjective code of ethics, they get together with other people who they believe share their similar code of ethics. So then they have a group, and then it is like cooperative.
Yeah, you get. I'll just tell the audience that Rachel and I are both libertarian, and so we sort of like look out for groupthink.
Right.
And that can happen although I have noticed it with certain ENFPs that when they develop their TE, and especially if they like run a business, that sort of like gets their mind right.
Yeah. Especially if they have a lot of INTJ friends too, that can help. I've known a lot of ENFP and INFJ or INTJ couples, it seems like, and good friends. So.
Right. So, is there anything in that about the temperament that you would like to comment on?
Not really. I mean, that just seems pretty general. I liked what it said about the tightly configured personality. Was that speaking particularly about the NTs?
No, that's for all of the. It's actually something interesting. Is like there are traits of each of the temperaments that sort of entail other traits. So it's not just a case of sort of like random traits. It's there's something there that's pulling these traits together, and it's the motivations associated with the temperament. So this is why Linda Barron's called them sort of like essential motivator patterns. And
Okay.
so part of the self-image of NT is I think it's called AIR, for autonomy, ingenuity, and being resolute. And what it sort of means by autonomy is like thinking for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
being
Mm-hmm.
independent thinkers. I'm just gonna log in. Am I gonna log? I think I'd log in with the wrong one. Oh, I'm gonna press that one. I think I'd log in with the previous Hangout that I recorded a few hours ago. And if I click, because this way people can see me whilst I'm showing screen. I'm just gonna click on that. So I'll whilst I do that, I'll move it down to the first couple of paragraphs. So if you read through that, please, and then stop whenever you feel like it to comment.
Okay. So we have the Fieldmarshal, ENTJ. Briggs had a special name for the ENTJs. She called them the leaders of leaders. In a word, super leaders. This, no doubt, because she could see how efficient the ENTJs are in marshaling task forces in the field in preparation for launching major enterprises. Marshaling forces is the coordinating of personnel and material in the service of a clearly defined objective, something ENTJs seem especially cut out for. Best then to call them the field marshals. Okay, I can comment there. Just being a kid, maybe like, let's see, around 10 years old in my first neighborhood, there were a lot of kids on my street, and I would just kind of get these ideas in my head of like something I want to do. And we would all like go down to this creek where you had to walk across a big, huge cornfield to get there. And it was kind of far away. And we would have to kind of ask our parents before if we could go and stuff. But I would get everybody together, and I really wanted to build a bridge across the creek. And I'd just be like, wouldn't it be cool if we could build a bridge and do this? And just like kind of just, you know how to do this, or like you have a shovel and you have, or whatever, you have an axe, and we can just use that and cut down some of these branches. Or I'd just be throwing out, but I never felt like I made it happen, but I'd just be telling everybody different things like, you have this and we can do this and this can happen. But I didn't necessarily like control the whole process, but it somehow would come together. And there were different little things like that we would do in the neighborhood. And it seemed like I was able to kind of get people together to get something done.
It was interesting what you said there. Is I gave the impression is that you're coming up with lots of ideas towards a practical end, whereas the other difference with ENTP is they're coming up with lots of ideas for the sake of the ideas because they're interesting.
Yeah.
And then they can sort of learn how to get a practical result out of it. But it's like in terms of like what is setting the agenda and what is a tool to accomplish that agenda. And with ENTJ, it's the extroverted thinking, the practical thinking that's setting the agenda, and the idea generation is just a tool that helps to achieve the TENs.
Yeah, and it seems to be more geared around the actual experience, like the extroverted sensing. What are we gonna get? What's the experience gonna be? Like another one that I did was I had a terrarium one time filled with 17 praying mantises. Somehow we found out where all the praying mantises, I don't know if you've seen these bugs, but they're like this long.
Yeah.
They eat a lot of grasshoppers, and so we caught them all, and we would just keep like grasshoppers coming, and we fed them all, and we watched their whole life cycle, and the females would eat the males, and then they had eggs, and then we put all the eggs back out into the wild. And I had a few friends that were like helping me do it, like helping catch them and bring in like grasshoppers. And I think of examples when I was a kid, because to me that's one of the clearest ways to like get to my type, because I wasn't like analyzing everything yet. So yeah, that definitely makes sense. It was all about getting certain results. And then also just kind of observing it and experiencing it because it was interesting. Just, it's like, I don't know.
When do you think the FE, because other people who have seen you in videos before, when you were sort of identifying as ENFJ, so what were the sort of things so just do like a quick thumbnail sketch for the audience. What do you think in your upbringing was drawing you towards ENFJ? Was it that and the fact is the course you studied at the university that sort of like maybe developed the FE?
I don't think it was so much university. I think that it was like growing up in a very German family. My mom is 100% German Catholic, and I used to go to these like 500-person family reunions in big dining halls with the big long tables that everyone sits at, like German style. And I don't know, it was just kind of the pressure always to like just do the appropriate thing, and always like kind of, my mom, I imagine, is probably an ESFJ. She seems like she has a lot of extroverted feelings, so that might be why that kind of rubbed off on me, because I feel like I can do it. I feel like it's not that hard for me, but it's also not something I always have energy for. Like, if I'm really honest with myself, I tend to prioritize just ideas and like gathering information and applying information and working towards something more than the people around me. And I have had comments sort of about that in jobs. Not, like I said, I think I do a pretty decent job making people feel like heard and acknowledged, because I've grown up like that, and I try to make a conscious effort to consider how other people are feeling and how they're affected. But I know that I don't do the best job at it.
It was interesting what you said there about German and ESFJ. I've just completed a hangout with Yelena, ENFP. She lives in Germany, and so she can attest to the sort of like the German work ethic. And so people would look at functionally, and they would say, "Oh, ESFJ, they don't value TE. They value FE over TE." But I would say, well, look at the temperament. SJ, and also the nature of FE, it's focused on other people. It's focused on the norms around them. And if the norm around them is to do the TE thing, then they are going to adapt to the TE, even though it's not a valued function. And so that particular type might very much have a work ethic at work and more FE at home. But even at home, it's going to be directing their children towards success and just whatever social values they're in.
Yeah, my mom raised us very much on, and I think, just personally, I think that extroverted feeling, it always gets called like a warm and fuzzy thing. I don't necessarily think that's always the case, depending on what their values are. Because if they think it's what's best for you to be focused on TE or work ethic and pragmatic stuff, like my mom thought that's what would be best for us, because that's what she's learned, because she came from a family of farmers where, you know, hard work's a part of life, and you have to contribute, and you have to show that you're productive, and that's like her values that she grew up with. So she thought it was best to impart that on us, and she could be pretty cold about it.
And that would be that's the social mission block of, I've got a table in the way here. That's the social mission block of ESFJ, FE and SE working together. And so, like, well, I think Victor called it emotional pressure.
Yeah, that was all I couldn't handle. That's why my mom and I still have a very difficult relationship, because I know we just see things so differently, and that's what she wants to emotionally pressure me to be or do these things that she thinks is what's best for me, and that is what would be best for the whole family or for the community or whatever in her view. But I'm like, well, I have these talents and I have my own mind here and I have my own ideas about what I can contribute. So it's hard to communicate that to her in a way where it's kind of just like, it feels like she doesn't believe me, that I'm just not trying to be, she almost sees me as like, well, are you just completely selfish, or because you're not motivated by the FE stuff.
And there's a big difference there, is like you're both practical people, but she's cooperative, you're utilitarian.
Mm-hmm.
You pretty much want similar results in terms of successful results, but you want to do it your own way. And she's thinking, well, why aren't you doing it the tried and true way? This is what works.
Right. She's like, well, I'm showing you, this is I'm your mom and I'm showing you how to do this. Like, don't you value me because I'm your mom and I took care of you? And I'm like, yeah, but also I just think it's going to work better this other way. It's nothing personal. You know?
Do you want to tell the audience about that funny story about you not wanting to wear the frickin' dress?
Oh. Yeah, so another emotional pressuring thing was my mom was really big on, she wanted to do my hair, so she would like get her curling iron out and want to make my hair all big and poofy like in the early 90s, because she came out of the 80s. And anyway, so she wanted my hair like all floofy, and then she always wanted me to wear this pink dress to church on Sundays, and I would just scream at her, I hate it, like I don't want to wear, I don't like pink. I don't want to wear. And honestly, I truly believe deep down that I only didn't want to wear it because she liked pink and wanted me to wear it. And I just had to be different or something. Just something in me was like, because you expect me to wear a pink dress because I'm a girl, like I understood that by this age. And I'm like, then I don't want to wear pink. You can't tell me what kind of, person I am. Like, so I had that attitude towards it. And I don't know if that's all the details that I told last time. It's just
pretty much.
It was just, I didn't like dresses, mostly because they weren't practical either. I was a tomboy kid and I played outside and caught snakes and bugs and stuff. So I wasn't trying to wear a dress and get it all dirty. And
there's a non-type factor. A female INTP I know, Nicole, is like, if you're growing up in an outdoors environment, you're going to be doing more extroverted, sensey type of things, just because of the way you've grown up. And so you're going to appear more extroverted and practical than, say, types that grew up in a more urban environment where there was less opportunities to explore physical outdoorsy things.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would say I had a good balance because I was homeschooled, so I spent a lot of time just watching TV and soaking in information. I had a lot of visual encyclopedias, and I would go to the library every week for like 20 books because it was a couple streets over from my house. So I would just be able to walk over there and just come home with a whole bunch of new books. And so I did spend a lot of time just consuming information. And
what kind of books did you read?
Oh gosh, I mean, just broad, just any topic that seemed interesting. I was really interested in weather phenomenon for a while because it's something I can see happening outside. There's a lot of storms and tornadoes in Ohio. Right. So I just became really fascinated with that. Also, it was like a practical thing because I'm scared of tornadoes and I want to understand them more and know what to do and how to tell when things are forming. Or I just wanted to understand like the different air masses coming together. And so then I would share those facts with people in my family and they'd call me a nerd and that I'm thinking too much about it. And I'm like, these conditions are becoming, favorable for a tornado. We should be careful.
Yeah, you don't want to...
I'd be that annoying kid, like,
You don't end up in the, have a tornado and end up in the land of Oz and then have to follow the yellow brick road.
Right, and I watched that movie all the time when I was a kid, too, so.
Yeah. What's interesting about that movie is before they actually get presented with the things at the end, so, for example, I think it's the straw man with a brain and the tin man with a heart. they actually go through struggles and there's character development where they actually show those things before they actually get them. So the straw man comes up with these resourceful, clever ideas as he goes through it, and then right at the end they're given the branding, and then he suddenly is academically smart. Well, he'd already become smart as he went through it. So it was like they just put that bit at the end for the people who couldn't read the subtext.
Yeah.
It's still disappointing though, where they go through all that and you wake up and it's just a dream.
Right. I know.
Right. So where did you stop on this?
Oh, okay. I just did the first paragraph. So
okay.
Let's see. Another word that is useful in defining this kind of coordinating activity is mobilizing. Personnel and material can be mobilized as well as marshaled. The only difference being that mobilizing connotes moving effective forces towards a goal, while marshaling connotes binding effective forces to a goal. Either way, the basic driving force of these field marshals is to command forces that promise to be effective in achieving the objectives that they are able to visualize.
Yeah, I think I've got the color code I'm using here is like anything to do with like NI.
Yeah, visualizing.
Turn in purple and
purple. That's the NI color.
Yes, for me. It is for me. Jeff wanted it to be the SP color, but I said
nope. Purple's the NI color. It's the wizard color.
Ah. you got the orangey yellow is the management TE.
Okay, there we go. That works.
Yeah, so lots of any comments on paragraph 2?
Nope, that seems to just kind of go along with what I was sharing already.
Okay, so number 3.
It was no accident that World War II saw 3 of these ENTJs in command of our armed forces: George Marshall, Dwight Eisenhower, and Douglas MacArthur. I actually did a Vine charcoal drawing of Dwight Eisenhower because he's one of my favorite presidents. I did that in college for a class. Each a genius in strategic mobilizing and marshalling of personnel and material towards worldwide aims. Marshall, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the outbreak of war, was already at the top, and he knew full well which commanders to pick to run the campaigns in the Eastern and Western theaters. Eisenhower, a mere colonel at the time, but a brilliant student of warfare who had worked for Marshall as his best campaign planner, and General MacArthur, languishing with little to...
I will get there. And I need the next one. There we go.
Languishing with little to do in the Philippines. No, it was no accident because Marshall had long experience with both of these men, and he fully appreciated the high strategic intelligence of each. And I was just reading your note there. Okay. As a variant of Plato's rationals and Aristotle's dialecticals, the ENTJs are a little different from other NTs in most respects. Like all the rationals, they are abstract in their communication and utilitarian in how they implement their goals. They choose to study science, are preoccupied with technology, and work well with systems. Their point of view is pragmatic, skeptical, relativistic, focused on spatial intersections and intervals of time. Interesting. I'm trying to think of what that means. It's focused on spatial intersections and intervals of time. I mean, I really relate to that. That sounds...
There's a section in Please Understand Me Too. I actually think that section about time might be a little bit too biased towards the NTPs. And because it's sort of a static way of thinking. And that links up with LII, TI, and X is seen as static because it's like when you have a theory of how things work, well, that theory is a little bit static. It's like, this is how it is, this is the relationship between the factors. Whereas when something's dynamic, it's not a static theory. So with NTPs, it tends to go, theory. The theory doesn't quite work, so it then gets broken apart and a new theory forms. So it tends to go dit, 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 sort of static progression. And INFPs, FINX, are also quite static, so they have their principles that are going to go stick to. So they're quite rigid. So it's like INTPs can be rigid with their theories, INFPs can be rigid with their principles, whereas the ENTJs, they're going to be fluid with the ability to adapt, and because it's like they're not rigid with all the niceties of all the logic. It's about how best to achieve the objective.
Right.
And so they will adapt their means to achieve that goal. Whereas with INTP, they care more about having a nice theory at times than like getting towards the goal.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
Back to you.
All right. Where are we at? Okay. The intervals of time.
Yeah.
They base their self-image on being ingenious, autonomous, and resolute. They would, if possible, be calm. They trust reason, are hungry for achievement, seek knowledge, prize deference, and aspire to be wizards of science and technology. Intellectually, they are prone to practice strategy far more than diplomacy, tactics, and especially logistics. And yeah, I want to emphasize the wizards of science because there is that abstract element in there.
In purple.
Where, like, I think of Carl Sagan, who's widely thought to be an ENTJ, but he kind of was able to present the universe in a way where it wasn't so defined that it lost its magic. And I think that's why Cosmos had such a profound impact on people, because he left it kind of magical. And I think that's kind of...
So is the stuff that you find magical, and now you know about typology and functions, does it tend to be NI stuff that you see as magical?
Oh, well, I mean, I would certainly assume so. I mean...
And what is that particularly? Because NI, I always like trying to get sort of concrete examples of NI, because it's like so hard to define. I don't know. It is hard to define. I don't really know, because it's kind of just it is just kind of like a visual, it's like a visual process. I think it's probably linked to the pineal gland in the brain. I think it might have to do with to me, it's almost like a form of vision. It is like a form of seeing, but on the inner mind or something. But it's where, like, I'm just sitting and it's like when everything gets really still and quiet and like just then, yeah, the quieter things get and the more still things get, then it's like all of a sudden I can like feel or kind of perceive. It's not really feel, but it's like I can see different things kind of come together, and then something will just click, and then I'll know, like I'll have an insight where now everything has come together and makes perfect sense. But I don't know how it works. I just know that I'm going towards this symbol thing, and that seems to have an answer. And then it kind of just comes together, and oh yeah, okay, this is what I was trying to put together now. and it all kind of comes together. At least that's how it works for me with, I guess, the TE and the lead. It's like, it kind of helps me to bring information together that's relevant towards the certain agenda, the NI agenda that I have. Have you got an example of this where you had a problem and you were able to solve it in the way you've just described? A particular example?
No, I mean, I have to have, I mean, I'm sure, let's see if I can think of one. It's hard to think of a specific example because it's just kind of always going on at all times.
Because that makes it real for people, because otherwise they can think, Oh, that's just N flim flam.
I know. I mean, it kind of is, because it's an internal thing. Let me think. It's hard for me to not, like, I want to make this super global. I'm trying to think of a specific example, but the way it works is so global for me, to where
So what is it? So it's sort of like a situation where you had a problem, you mulled it over, and then you came up with a solution. So what I sort of want is an example of a problem that you had, and then how you came up with a solution.
I don't know why I'm just going
Okay,
totally
fair enough.
blank. I'm just totally blanking out.
What? So when you think there, right, keeping everything quiet and then going into your own place, the supervisee of ENTJ is INFJ. So theoretically, on that sort of self-affirmation block, it would be NIFI there. I'll just show it on the webcam there. So people who know Model G is watching this, or at least they should be watching it. The benefit of watching the Keirsey Hangouts, you learn some extra stuff. This is a self-affirmation block. Yeah, that's social mission, TENE. The NE working as a tool for TE. Ideas to achieve business goals. And then you've got, look, you've got ESFJ there as well as social adaptation block.
Mm-hmm.
And then here, this is least energy for this. I mean, you can do the TI thing, but you care more about practical results than the
Right.
logical consistency, than having a
Right.
beautifully consistent theory.
Right. Indeed. Okay, a good example would probably be like at work. I last worked at a little market called Farm Fresh Market, and it's about maybe like 500 square feet of store space, or maybe 1,000 square feet, but it's a really tiny little building, little store. And just a small, it was a husband and wife that owned it. They got divorced. Anyway, the store was like kind of plummeting. We were like short on money. It was a nasty divorce. So he drained the bank account at one point. He was trying to manipulate her through the store and the money, and it was a mess. And so I'm in the middle of this situation, working. I'm the only one working full time. I have keys to the store, so I can like open and close the store. And I kind of just find myself having to like take care of all these like fires that are constantly starting. We're having coolers breaking down. We're having to move a lot of frozen meat and preserve it into other spaces, and we have almost no space. So we have all these problems. And this is kind of the situation where I think I tend to do best. Just kind of everybody else, what do I do? What's the most important thing to do right now? And maybe I think the NI helps me to tune everything else out and kind of allow like the most important thing to do right now to arise. So it's like, okay, like where people will stand there for like 15 minutes, like the cooler's not working. What do we do? It's like the products are warm. Immediately start putting them into a cart and let's get them into the fridge. Like, to me, it's so common sense and so obvious. I'm like, this is what you do. Like, so it's like little things like that, but also in the broader sense. What were you going to show?
Well, this is just an example. So you're stimulated there by these activities, like these pressure environments. And so that's called the beneficiary shift. And it's sort of shifting to ESTP mode, where it's like, oh no, we've got a crisis. How do we get there? So it's like, there's the crisis stimulating you, and it stimulates the TE. And that's the social mission block of ESTP, SETE.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay. And so that's a good point, that's a crisis situation. And then when I'm at the store on a regular day, it's usually so chill, almost nothing's going on. So then I'm thinking like big picture, like, okay, does this store have a long-term vision? What are we doing with our marketing? what are we doing with our branding? So one of the major things that I did there, I was thinking, well, people don't know about us. And also people don't see our store as like very put together. So I wanted to kind of like improve the image of the store because it was a little disorganized and just, so I did some artwork, some hand-drawn signs, because I kind of learned at Trader Joe's that it's something that people respond really well to, is like hand-drawn signs for products and stuff. So I did all these hand-drawn signs, and I redid all of our produce tags and everything hand-drawn, and I made like laminated signs that you could use a dry erase marker on so that you could change the price, because we didn't have a system before. We were just like erasing signs with alcohol with Sharpie marker, and it was smeared and they looked horrible. So it was just like a little quick fix that just instantly changed the look of the store. And it was kind of that NI where it's like, what would make a big impact on this store that I could do with little effort, like in a day? And so I just kind of knocked all those signs out like in one day, and everyone was like, wow, it looks so much better in here. Customers are making comments, and
So what made you move from Trader Joe's to that place?
Well, that was because Trader Joe's was an extremely physical job. Like,
Right.
I mean, you have to lift like 50 pounds pretty consistently and lift stuff up high. And
Wow.
this was a little tiny store. So, I mean, we only had shipments really come in 2 days a week, and I didn't even have to deal with them most of the time. I was just doing like social media online, and I was closing the store down at night. So I was doing like cleaning and stuff, but I wasn't doing any heavy lifting. And it was also, I value local markets. I've kind of always had a vision of working closer to food, like closer to where it comes from. And I really wanted to get to know the local farmers and local vendors, because I just thought, if I'm really going to get integrated into this community, like practically, I need to get to know other people that are producing and running their own small businesses. And it was a good way to do that. And I did meet a lot of people. So, I mean, I got everything I needed out of the job. It's unfortunate what happened there, where they ended up hiring someone to manage the store.
No, that could have been you.
It could have been me, and it was not. And
it should have been you, given the.
I was already. That's what everybody, all my coworkers, all the other girls, they thought, well, you're here all the time and you're doing it anyway. But they brought in this guy. But it's all a long story. The owner's now dating him, and he's like a drug addict, and it's just kind of falling downhill right now. But
yeah,
that's
careful
why
what you say. We are recording.
Right. That's the reality, though.
Right.
There's my ENTJ. I'm like, well, they're probably not going to see this, but if they do, that's what happened. Everybody knows that's what happened.
Right. Okay. So where did we get up to on this? I think you said logistics was the problem, yeah, and then it was.
Yeah, we got to logistics. Further, having a decisive or scheduling nature, they tend to choose the coordinator's directive role over the probing, exploring, engineers, and formative role. And because they are so forceful in their expressiveness, interesting, they find greater satisfaction in the role variant of Fieldmarshal than Mastermind. To visualize...
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I've done TE in yellow, and this sort of like faded orange that looks a bit browny. That's what I've sort of put in under SE. So the forceful. You know what we said there about they can get launched by the extroverted sensing, by challenges.
Oh, it's okay. So there's a graph, looks like, to visualize ENTJ.
Did you read through the stuff above? Oh, yeah, forceful expressiveness. Yeah, I think you read through that. Yeah.
Yep.
Right, then I'll push this up a bit.
That's interesting, though. I do see that compared to an INTJ.
Yeah, they can think they are. They can, like...
No, but they're not able to really... Yeah.
It's funny when they think they're 8s.
Is that a thing? There's INTJs that think they're 8s?
Yeah, I just find it hilarious.
Because they're convicted, but they don't have that physical embodiment that an 8 would actually have.
Yeah, they're just in the grip of the extroverted sense. It's like
Right.
Friedrich Nietzsche, right, writing these books where he's like in love with the extroverted sensor.
Yeah.
Deary me. Right, so the idea here is that the ENTJ has a predisposition to play the role of field marshal. So say you lived 500 years ago, you might have this predisposition to be a leader, but it would be difficult for you to express that in that particular social field.
Yeah. Right.
So,
I mean, it's still difficult today. As a woman, I'm only 5'2". I mean, yeah.
I didn't know about your height.
Yeah, I'm pretty short.
Right. And you were lifting things that were 50 pounds.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
That's pretty good.
I managed the meat department, so I would have to get boxes of like 8 frozen chickens, and I'd have like 15 of those, and I'd have to like load them onto a cart every morning. I would have to offload those and then put them back and deal with it, like heavy hams and all that. So yeah.
So the role that best fits the predisposition of ENTJ is the mobilizer. So it's like the extroverted directive NT sort of CEO position. According to this theory, the hardest thing for them would be the role of architect in say the INTP's role, in that just trying to perfect a design. I mean, they can do it intellectually, but it's like they're always like, I want to get towards the goal efficiently. If it's good enough, let's achieve it. Whereas INTP would like, they get stuck in the design phase and wanting it to be perfect. And it's like there's this fighter aircraft in India called the Tejas, and the Indians have been designing it for 30 years. I mean, come on, that's a little bit too much INTP going on there. 30 years on one aircraft. I mean, I know it gets longer and longer, but it is getting ridiculous. Like F-35 started in about 95, and it's still not really finished. So there are weird things happening with complexity. It's almost as if the human species is reaching a certain point, especially with military technology, where it, like, things just get so complicated and there's so many different just organizations involved, where you would have like 1,000 companies just involved to produce one military aircraft.
Yeah. That's incredible. Yeah.
Because of all the subsystems.
And so you're talking about like the architects just, I mean, there's probably, I always think of like,
well, and it's not just, it's also architect, a designer. Yeah, because it changed them to designer. So designer of systems, like getting that perfect theory or perfect system. I mean, the ENTJ can do it.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I'm a tri-type of the systems builder as a 371. So I really have like elements of that, but more, I guess, on the external level of the external environment, building the system and trying to, and getting that, rather than the internal, where like an INTP might be like a 731, maybe, if that's possible, or an ENTP. They might be more focused on the abstract.
Yeah, there's not many INTPs with a 3 in there.
No, probably not. No, but an ENTP could definitely be a 731.
Yeah, because of that creative, extroverted thinking.
Well, you thought Peter Schiff's the 731, right?
Oh yeah, where did I write that? I think I wrote that in the Enneagram group. Yeah, I'm pretty darn sure. But I did also say that when he says things that sound very E1, you know, it does help that his father was put in prison, and he effectively had his book banned. The only book banned because they banned him from selling it, And since he was the only one who was selling his book, they effectively banned a book.
Oh, wow.
So only 2 books were banned in American history. One was sort of pornography, and the other one was hymns called the Federal Mafia.
Yep.
So
Yeah, interesting.
yeah. So in terms of E1, his father went to prison because he made the point: you cannot force people to fill out a tax return, and there is no law saying that you have to fill out a tax return, because if you are forcing someone to fill out a tax return, that then cannot be used as evidence in a trial, because it would be compelled testimony and break the Fifth Amendment. So they always try to get around it by saying, oh, it's not compulsory to fill out the testimony. You filled it out because it was obviously voluntary because you chose to fill it out. But then it said it's not. They said people get put in prison for not filling out a tax return.
Yeah.
So it is compulsory. So that thing that it breaks the Fifth Amendment, he would not give in on that, and he died in prison at 87, blind. He would not give in.
Dang.
So that kind of external thing, that's really, even with an ENTP resembler, that's going to make them feel something in terms of, so that's going to contribute towards his own libertarianism and his father teaching him that. So that's where I think the 1 is there, and he really gets annoyed by inconsistency. So he doesn't like Trump's hypocrisy and inconsistency. The fact that in 2016 Trump was saying this is all a bubble, all these jobs figures are phony, this is a huge big. So Peter Schiff liked Trump the candidate, he doesn't like Trump the president, because Trump is just so tactical and expedient, not consistent. So there is that consistency that Peter Schiff likes, and so that's the E1, and of course all the E3 stuff with his business. But then he does talk about things like, oh, people only work so that they can enjoy things later on. So it's like, for him, it's like a deferred gratification rather than the work in itself, which makes me think 731 or 713.
Yeah, I can see that, definitely.
I have thought sometimes, I did wonder, does Peter Schiff more resemble ENTJ because his like business logic is so strong? But I realized that, that's just him referring to these things. It's just because that's his nature as a stockbroker, where he's going to know those things. And so, and also he does say stuff that's FI break.
Yeah,
really does. I mean,
his personality alone.
Yeah. And like he was complaining about John McCain just after he died, saying he wasn't a very good senator and stuff. And I was like, Peter, you can wait a week.
Yeah. Right.
You know, let the coffin cool down. He's not even buried yet. He's waiting in state.
So that's an interesting point, because in the Myers-Briggs, when I first started learning typology, I was thinking, okay, ENTP is NETI-FE. Oh, they've got FE they can develop, so they should become good at that, or they could become good at FE and should be able to know when not to say something. And like, you'd think they should learn that. But then when I started learning socionics and learning about the FI break and how they kind of talk about it, it's like, actually, it's a lot more difficult. And because I used to think of an ENTJ as having like no feeling awareness, because, well, FI is last. It's their fourth, it's their inferior function. So ENTJs, they just don't know they're just blunt. And I just thought they don't know how to gauge people's reactions. But in fact, it seems that because of that role, it's role FE for ENTJ, right?
Yeah.
So it seems like if you're encouraged to do that, like I was, and to play that role or to know how to do that, I mean, ENTJs can seem to be pretty socially aware.
I mean, people write in the Briggs profiles, and what I'm going to do now in future, folks, Instead of calling it American School Jungian Compatible Typology, so to describe the kind of Jungian-based typology they do in the United States, I'm going to call it two things: Briggs-Keirsey,
Yeah.
or JBK, Jung Briggs-Keirsey. So because they were writing the profiles like this, oh, I better put some TE stuff in. I better. So for ENTP, I better put some NE in. I better put some TI in. I better put some FE in. I better put some SI in. But whereas Keirsey, he was writing the profiles holistically, so he wasn't filtering anything out. And so when he wrote the ENTP profile, they may, however, deliberately employ debate tactics to the disadvantage of their opponents, even when the opponents happen to be close associates and valued friends. Indeed, ENTP is the most able of all the types to maintain a one-up position with others, while to be taken in or manipulated by another is humiliating to them, offending their pride in being masters of the art of one-upmanship. That's FI break. I mean, one-upping their associates, and that's a little bit like the one-upmanship with ESTPs, to sort of show where they're top dog.
Right.
On sort of physical level. ENTPs are doing it intellectually.
Right.
So you got to think, grow up, ENTPs.
Well, that's what I think. That's literally what I was just thinking. It's like, to me, it's like, well, you know, like, I just don't have time for that. Like,
I mean, it's like, if you compare ENTJ with ENTP, it's like, well,
here's what it is.
They seem 10 years older, the ENTJs.
I was going to say, here's what it is I think that I have a lot of the same ideas as an ENTP, where someone's saying something and I'm just like no, or I want to say something, but it's like, most of the time I'm like, no, it's not worth it. Yeah. They won't get it. They can't get it. My NI is just like, nope, they don't get it. But it's going to be, there's nothing that's going to, but the ENTP seems to always go for it. And, well, I'm going to show that I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know,
that's the thing. And it's like, it's an irony there that they socialize with people by sharing their ideas, but in their effort to share their ideas and impress people, they end up annoying them and antagonizing them. And this is something that I used to do as well. It's like, because ironically, they want the approval from the people that they're intellectually humiliating. So, so it's like, I'm going to impress you by how I humiliate you. And it's like, no, you've got things perverted there. You've perverted your deep down desire to impress people. And it's like, you're not winning approval by, because it's like, I'm going to impress them by, and it's like they get a little bit competitive as well. And that's where their own sort of, because they really enjoy it. So it's an EP thing in where they love the intellectual challenge. And of course, then you can get unhealthier ones where they do the trolley kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think Sanna's talked about her father, where you get the super ENTP, where they develop that TE and it's practical, and that's where you get the inventor. And if you want an example, Keirsey's version of ENTP would be if you read Wisdom of the Enneagram level 3, where it talks about being productive. That's where the Keirsey ENTP would be. So a lot of these do tend to be like super type profiles. So it's like when you read the ENTJ, it's like, if you're just an average ENTJ reading this, it's like, oh shit. If I'm not a CEO, I'm failed.
Right.
and it's like Keirsey's, you should see Keirsey's INTP profile on Keirsey.com. It's like, if you're not a flipping genius, you're going to feel like really like a low functioning version of INTP, because it is written like a genius, the Keirsey INTP. But part of that is like, Keirsey Jr. himself is now trying to like fit together loads of physics theories, and I don't know what the third one's called. Like you've got Keirsey, like the grandson of Keirsey Senior, is now an astrophysicist. So there's a lot of TI going in there. So it's like super INTPs. So it's like, well, we're not all like that. So it's like I did a little video a few weeks ago called "How INTP Can Any One Person Get?" And it was like showing an article by David Keirsey, and it was like so INTP. It was like the most INTP argument article you could get, absolutely no practical application whatsoever, and it was just talking about the edge of chaos and the edge of order, and actually writing about categories and things and can we connect things together. And it's like, this is no practical benefit, and this is just a complete TI. I'm gonna try and put this politely. TI. The TI, an orgasm of TI.
I gotcha. I figured you were going in that direction. Yeah. Get what you mean.
Yeah. So they can get like that. INTP is thinking about thinking. Right. So what they really need to do is like actually say, and those people who think that Keirsey's architect profile is Socionics ILI, I say no. Go back to typology school. One line, it says, if an organization is to get their most out of an architect rational, they need to provide them with an efficient support staff to capture their ideas as they emerge and before they lose interest and move on to another idea. So if you can have that INTP with the ENTJ, then the ENTJ can get it done. It's like they can filter out all these ideas, and the ENTJ will pick the one that works and implement it, because it's a different skill set. Having the ideas and designing stuff is a different skill set from then implementing those ideas and all of the development, especially with these long-term projects like designing an aircraft. It's like, okay, how do you then coordinate it all? And so what is amazing about Keirsey is the way he can get the types to reflect a social role. And it starts to get a little bit spooky as to like the fact that you do have these social roles and the people do line up with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a little bit there in about the way how people, and Carl Jung wrote about it, that people, they don't individuate in isolation, they individuate into a society. So it would be interesting to like try to identify people of the same type in different cultures. And so imagine a culture that had sort of like very little technology, say somebody on, say, a remote Pacific island. I mean, there is actually one near India where the people are like still in the Stone Age.
Oh, wow.
And it's actually been sealed off and nobody else is allowed to go there. And they haven't even, they actually think they've not discovered fire yet. There's this one particular island that nobody else is allowed to visit. And they actually, what they found these people doing is there's a ship wrecked there, and it seems that the natives were taking bits of metal off the ship for spears. So I was wondering is, in that actual society, do you still have the 16 types? Because they've not got, they're not going to, it's a completely different society that they would individuate into. So genetically, they might have the 16 types, but will they individuate to them? Will there be an INTP in that society?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It could, yeah.
Because most societies, you know, the way the world is connected now, there is that higher level of technology. And ironically enough, it's in those countries where there's less technology that people have to be more resourceful.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think it could be that they would still have the 16 types if it's a pretty like, if it's a part of like just a human being's psychological structure that we kind of have these tendencies.
Yeah, so in Keirsey would be,
could be.
The predisposition would be there. But how would it be expressed? So it's like genotype and phenotype.
Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying. But could there be individuation?
Yeah, and that's the thing. So when I was looking at Carl Jung writing his little section on individuation, that made me think of role enactment in Keirsey. So this combination of the type being individuated within a society.
But what if we're not? What if we aren't advanced enough to individuate? What if we still have more to go?
That's a good point. I mean, and actually, Carl Jung actually wrote, and the libertarians all like this, that it's best to individuate within a free society. And then at the end of the book, he complains about socialism. Right. So where did we get to? Did we start this paragraph?
I don't think so.
I don't remember.
Nope. Yeah, I can read it real quick. I probably have about 10-15 minutes, actually. So how much more do we have?
This might end up being a two-parter.
Okay, we can do another part another time. Yeah. I'd be down for that.
Just as long as we finish, like, say, at the end of a paragraph, rather than halfway through.
All right. So, although field marshals are just as rare as the other rationals, something less than 2% of the total population, they seem to have influence beyond their numbers. Such individuals, male or female, of whatever age, are bound to lead others, and from early on they can be observed taking command of groups. So forceful is their climb to the top. In some cases, field marshals simply find themselves in charge of groups and are mystified as to how this happened. That's kind of my experience. But the reason is that they have a strong natural urge to bring order and efficiency wherever they are, to harness people and resources to lead them towards their goals with minimum waste of effort and maximum progress. Every operation needed for achieving the objective shall be executed, and all unnecessary operations are quietly and permanently eliminated from the planned sequence of events. Okay, yeah, that's another good example with my workplace. Is I'm watching all these things falling apart and I'm unable to communicate with my boss. I actually think she's an ENFJ. Her husband, the ex, I'm imagining was some kind of thinking dominant. He was a business type of person. He's the one that ran everything basically. And she just dealt with customers and the people and stuff. So I couldn't even talk to her, but I kept thinking of all the things that I would want to say. Because she wasn't open to my ideas, because we never really developed a friendship. It was really difficult. It was a really difficult clash of personalities, and she had some issues, and nobody else could really communicate with her either. She was just very emotional about the whole situation, so it just wasn't really possible to talk about practical stuff. But anyways, my whole thing was like, look, we have all these things that are breaking down. Like, let's just make our lives as simple as possible, and let's just stop doing stuff that's taking too much effort, and let's just focus on what we're good at and make that really good. So we were offering all these like take and bake products, like the meat cutters were having to do all this extra work and stuff that took a long time, like this chili that took all this time to cook. So I'm thinking like, well, let's just cut back on that and let's just focus on our essentials because we're going through a tough time. So like, get rid of the unnecessary stuff so we can stay afloat and keep our,
I mean, the way you describe it, I'm thinking, have they only just been in business 5 minutes? They should know all of this stuff if they've been there years before.
They had been there 6 years. It wasn't too long. They started out as an online business, and then she just didn't know what she was doing, and it was the guy that really ran the business. And
yeah, but they should know that. I mean, even he should look at it and go, the failure of management there was not being closely connected enough to how the people do their jobs, the workforce, and then you would be able to see.
Well, that was the exact
look
problem.
At it, whereas you're seeing it.
Yeah.
You've got the management mindset. You've got the management mindset, the strategic mindset, and you're there on the ground floor seeing how things are going on. So I remember in 11 years ago talking to like a guy who was probably like ENTJ, this entrepreneur from Australia, and he was saying that he would want to work from the ground up, knowing how to do all of the crappy jobs, so that then he knows exactly what everyone has to do.
Exactly. That's where I'm at in my life. Yeah,
And
exactly.
this guy came over from Australia in order to take certain fashionable things from London back to Australia. So yeah, what you're saying there, mate, you thinking about how to talk to her and like going through it and planning it all, that made me think, oh, that's an example of the strategic mindset. Whereas the tactical mindset of the SP is, it was like they wouldn't plan it as much. They want to like say it as it comes up in the moment.
Right.
Now,
And that's what I think she responded well to, that kind of like communication, because I had another coworker, well, the guy that ended up taking over, I think he was probably her dual. He was like an ISTP. And he would just say stuff like, "What are you doing? Like, this makes no sense." And he would just call stuff out and in the moment, and she could respond to that and communicate with that, but she couldn't.
Yeah. What Dario Nadia said is that the ENTJs, they get locked into a plan, and so they can do a certain thing very quickly. And I suppose this is where the extroverted intuition comes in, as to how quickly they can then change the plan, so that they don't get into the robotic mode of thought of, this is what we do, this is what we can do really quickly, like a computer. And then if everything changes, it's depending on how well developed the particular ENTJ is with how they act under pressure with the extroverted sensing, coming up with new solutions, ideas with the extroverted intuition. So an example of somebody who was a little bit mechanical, Ted Cruz in the 2016 primaries. And it took him ages to sort of like boil things down into like 3 bullet points.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, Ted Cruz, you have this reputation for being this great lawyer, but your people skills suck.
And we think he's an ENTJ?
Yeah, Jeff and I came to the conclusion that
Okay, I could see it.
Because it's like just the way he would plan up, and he wouldn't be fresh in the moment. And when somebody's doing that and they sound prepared, people don't connect to that kind of person. So it's like if you know what you're talking about, you don't need to prepare. So I'm thinking with a lot of these politicians, like, what the heck? Why do you need other people to write your speeches for you? If you can't write your own speech, you're not qualified.
Yeah.
Because you cannot think for yourself.
Yeah. I agree there.
I mean, it doesn't have to be, I mean, it would sound more real as well if somebody did write a speech out where it was like, just do it, like, even if it was step by step with no flourish. The actual TJs would appreciate that. And it's like, straightforward thinking. We don't need to be told about. Oh, dearie me. Right. So what I've highlighted here is, so in the purple, so NI stuff, planning, objectives, intuition of time, intuition
sequence
of
of events. Yeah.
Yep. A little bit in sort of like faint orange is like the bits to do with power sensor. So taking charge, command, harness people, lead them, that sort of stuff. It's sort of faint there, but it's sort of there as the SE. And then I think there we go. There's some bits on the color coding. So far, Keirsey's touched on the TE, the NI, and the SE in this sort of holistic profile. They're sort of like the most noticeable things. The TE, the NI, the practical thinking, the long-term planning, and the extroverted sensor.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the most noticeable stuff in ENTJs.
Right. Yeah.
Especially if they also resemble an Enneagram 8.
Yeah, I kind of am wondering about my gut type. I mean,
you do seem quite accommodating. I mean, for an ENTJ, or maybe it's just your upbringing and with the extroverted feeling, or things that we put in the extroverted feeling bucket, but the development in terms of the way you've been socialized, and also the degree that you did of like, what are the best ways of dealing with people?
Well, yeah, that's like what it is for me. Is it's just like, well, you know, I mean, I practice yoga and meditation, so it's also a little different there. Whereas, like, I think that just being a heart-centered person just makes everything work. It's just more efficient and more. It's just better for everybody. Like, uh, being connected to your heart. I mean, it's not. I don't know.
Right. So because we've not got a lot of time left, how much time do we have
Yeah.
left?
Oh, I mean, I'm okay still. I'm actually just trying to leave by like 6:30, so I mean, I could go for another 10 minutes.
Right, we're about halfway through, so you can see there
I
that
was just trying to, yeah.
right, we might be a good idea if we stop now, folks. So we
Okay.
stop after the 5th paragraph, and we'll
Sounds
continue
good.
in part 2. So I'll continue to talk to our dog for a little bit. So I'm just going to stop it now, folks.
All
So
right.
come
Until
back.
next time.
Yep, next time in part 2.